Please welcome Patrick Lucey.
Well, welcome. So on behalf of Stats Forum, as Mike mentioned, it's a real delight to have everyone packed in here today. So my name's Patrick Lucey, I'm Chief Scientist here at Stats Forum, and what I want to do today is talk about some of the magic happening. So as Mike mentioned last year, if you were here, you heard me talk about generative AI and things that it couldn't do. So you can't really, you shouldn't use ChatGPT for sport, but a lot has changed over the last 12 months. So really what I want to do is talk about the opportunities. There's tremendous opportunities. Generative AI is the great enabler, but also there are risks. You know, this year has the most elections ever, okay? There's misinformation. So we just need to know what this technology can do, but more importantly, what it can't do, the limits associated with that. But there seems to be a new innovation happening every day. You know, it's in the mainstream news. If we look what's happened over the last month, there's a lot of new stuff happening. There's a lot of magic occurring. And the reason why we say magic, if anyone has read any of Arthur C. Clarke's writings, he talks about, you know, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And this is really what we're finding with the technology being generated now. So if you watch the Super Bowl in the US, you know, there's a lot of ads. Microsoft had their first ad for a very long period of time, and they just focused on how they're using generative AI for their Copilot. So any Microsoft technology that you use has generative AI embedded into it. Following that, you have Google's release of Gemini. So Gemini is their multimodal large language model, again, trying to embed it in anything that they do. So if you search, you're going to have generative AI-assisted search. More recently, OpenAI kind of blew everyone's hair back with this really cool text-to-video technology where you could just put a textual description and you can generate these really, really realistic looking videos. We've been doing a lot of stuff in this space. It's magical. I'm going to step you through that as we progress through this presentation. Then also the long-awaited release of the Apple Vision Pro. This could potentially present a paradigm shift on how we consume content. This mixed reality, this spatial type of computing can be a new way that we consume content. To do that, you need live, scalable, and interactive content. With our data and generative AI models, you can really unleash the power of this technology. So let's go through how the magic is made. Okay, so let's use ChatGPT as an example. At the heart of it is data. Okay, so when ChatGPT was released over 15 months ago, they used GPT-3 or 3.5, and it was just a text-based large language model. Now, the importance of text is that it is super powerful. Number one, it basically covers the world's knowledge. So anywhere where information has been documented, we can cover that via text. And text is also a compression of information. And so essentially once you have that data, you can use language modeling. And what language modeling is essentially predicting the next word. Okay? And so given the correlations that exist in natural language, that's a good proxy of understanding. And so essentially what these models can do is once upon a time you had just a mass amount of text data, so basically all of the world's knowledge in terms of the data from the internet, and essentially you can retrieve and ask questions and interrogate via this language modeling. And you know, that's how this really works. And so over the last 12 months, things have shifted towards multimodal large language models. And what that basically is still using text as the foundation of knowledge. We can actually couple that with images. So we have text and images. And so what actually happens there is from an image, you need a pairing of a text caption. And the same with video, you can pair that with text, and then audio, you can have that transcription. And so fundamentally, what you still have is the backbone of knowledge is text, but you can actually just give more detail with images, video, and audio, but you still need to pair that with text to give that description, but also find those correlations. And again, at that consumption layer, you're finding all this technology, all these new applications just being embedded with these generative AI capabilities. So we have GPT-4 or DALL-E 3, and then also you have Gemini there powering that. And so the reason why I highlight this is really the new tech stack, okay? It all starts with data, and then you can have these foundation models, and then you have that consumption layer. And really what I want to talk about is how can we utilize that for each specific domain, and that's where we see the big value of this technology. And in essence, what generative AI, as I mentioned before, is it's just a great enabler. It's enabling us to do more with that raw data. Once upon a time, you could only find text data via a Google search, which is basically a recommendation engine. You put in a text query, it'll return a bunch of links, and then you have to find the answer. The same with images and video. You just could find it via tagging. But now, through this generative AI technology, you can actually do very, very efficient retrieval, but then you can do interrogation. But also you can do some creative things. You can generate things that didn't happen before. And so there's a lot that you can do. And so in terms of how this is evolving, in terms of specifying the value to key stakeholders, I heard this quote from Robert Smith. So Robert Smith, he runs Vista Private Equity. Vista owns us, as a disclaimer, but he's a very, very smart, intelligent man. And when he describes things and summarizes things, it really makes sense. And he talks about the 3 ways of generative AI. I heard him talk late last year. In terms of the waves and the value, he talks about these 3 ways. So the first one, the value is going to go to the hardware providers. Basically what that means is if you have stock in NVIDIA, you're going to be very, very happy. So that's where the value is currently. In terms of wave 2, the value is going to endure to the benefit of the superscalers. And we're seeing that now with Microsoft. So Microsoft, again, they scale, they have cloud, they have these pervasive products, and essentially they've embedded generative AI into their platform there. But in terms of the long tail, the long-term value, and this is where we fit in terms of sports, is that we have a specific market and we have specific data, proprietary data, or specific data where we can tailor solutions to the market. And that's really where we see the value. And it's not just sport, it's other domains like that. So let's think about what that means. So with ChatGPT, GPT-4, essentially what that enables us to do is ask questions about general knowledge. Okay, so we're leveraging the data that exists in the internet, and we can ask questions about general things in our day-to-day lives. But what it struggles with is answering specific questions about specific domains. So let's look at the medical field. Okay. I think what we do in sport is most similar to what happens in the medical field. The reason why I say that is, to the medical field, you need objective and uniform data. Okay, so you think about electronic medical records. So that enables people to come up with better decisions, diagnosis, and identify symptoms, and come up with action plans. So that's what we want to do in sport. That's what we do in sport. We need objective and uniform data. There's 13,500 professional men's teams in football. There's emerging women's game. You need to have the same data points and the same measurements to compare apples to apples. Okay. Also, you need to augment that. So you can have the electronic medical records, which can give a good reconstruction of the view of a patient, but also you can augment that with more detailed information, such as X-rays, MRIs, wearables, such as heart rate, blood pressure. Okay? And then from that, you can come up with these assistants. Google have their MedPalm 2, or over the last couple of years, there's been tremendous progress in showing how we can automatically detect cancer better than experts. Okay? But fundamentally, you need to have that foundation of information. It has to be heavily curated and accurate. You can't get this stuff wrong. You can't get facts wrong. And the problem when you're dealing with general knowledge text is that misinformation can be propagated. If you're just hoovering up what's on the internet, it could be wrong. What we have here is that it has to be accurate. Okay? Now, another domain is autonomous vehicles. And what we do in sport is very similar to autonomous vehicles as well. So autonomous vehicles, the foundation of knowledge is actually the maps. So that has human curation in there, but you need to know the world. So people talk about grounding it to real-world knowledge. Essentially, you need to ground it to a map. And then from that, you can augment that with vehicle trajectories using RGB cameras, LiDAR and whatnot. But fundamentally, you need that foundation of knowledge there. And then you can see what Waymo are doing in forecasting trajectories there. So the reason why I highlight these two is I think in sport, that's most similar to what we do. Data is just not, hoovering things up from the internet. It's being uniform, objective, and that's central to everything. So it begs the question, what is the language of sport? At the heart of it, the backbone, our maps, or our electronic medical record, is really our Opta event data. That gives us the bones of the story. It gives us the structure, it tells us who has possession, what's happening during the game, the time and the score. That's fundamental, and we can do a lot of measurements on top. So from that raw data, we can come up with thermometers on top just to measure objective behaviour. And so what I mean by that is you look at it, XG. XG has been around for 10 years. We created that 10 years ago. We've evolved into XG2. We have possession value, which can be rolled up into momentum, which give us an idea of the quality of possession. In terms of predictive metrics, telling us how important a certain action is at a time during a match. You have live win probability. As we get into the end of the season, knowing who's going to win or most likely to win the various leagues out there. So the Premier League, you have Manchester City, Arsenal and Liverpool vying for top spot. People want to know who's more likely to win, who are they playing. If we can factor that into a single number, that's really powerful. If we can update that after every goal, that's really powerful. You need to have that live and scalable. That's what we're able to do. And then also injury time. The game of football has changed. It's not 3 minutes stoppage time. It can be 5, 10, 14 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You need to have an accurate estimation of that, and then we can come up with these objective measures. But to do that, you need to know what's happening during the game. You need that accurate event data. And each league is different as well. So we have different semantics. We have that, we have the different accents of sorts, so we need to adapt to each league. And then for each sport, there's a different language there, so we need to scale that. So we've done a lot of great stuff with tennis. So we have the rights with Tennis Australia and also the WTA. We can do similar things there. If anyone watched the Rugby World Cup or the Six Nations recently, you see the kick predictor, we provide that. Momentum, we can do similar metrics there. It has to be live and scalable. We do that for cricket. The IPL starting this week, and then we have March Madness coming up. So we have to do that. So I'm based in Chicago, so March Madness is happening, I think, on Thursday, and there's over 350 Division I teams, and that varies from after every game. So we need to update that. You have American football and baseball and ice hockey as well. So the key thing is that we need that uniform and objective data, and we can have our metrics on top, which can enhance us understanding what's happening in these sports. So that's the foundation. It can tell us what's happening, but then we can augment that via more colourful information, so more detailed information, such as tracking. So you can do that in venue or from remote tracking, and we can measure things that you couldn't before. So with event data, you can get on the ball information, but with tracking data, you can capture things that happen off the ball. You can measure all the pass options, you can measure the shape, you can get the fitness measures, and we can do that at scale. And so really what we focus on at Stats Perform, I touched on it last year, is that we're really focusing on the right-hand side here. There's a lot of work, so tracking data. We had a PySport meetup last night, which was great, and we briefly spoke about this. But tracking data has actually been around for 25 years. People think that player tracking data in soccer is a new thing. It's not. It's around 25 years. The problem is being able to scale that. And in terms of tracking data, there's really two dimensions and how people are using it. On the left-hand side, they're using it more for officiating. You're seeing this with goal line technology or VAR. You're seeing the NBA now using body pose technology. But the problem is that you need a lot of cameras in venue to scale that, to do those measurements. So you need that to do millimetre precise measurements. Now, on the right-hand side, when we track from broadcast, you don't really need millimetre precise measurements. You can get by with centimetre, and that's really what we're focusing on because we want to do this in a live and scalable way. And so that's kind of like the overview, kind of emphasising the importance of language, the importance of objective and uniform information. And from that, we can do some amazing things. So I'm going to talk about some of the magic that we've been creating over the last year, but really the last 3 or 4 years, and also how we can use the current evolution of technology that's happening outside of sport and the concept of retrieval augmented generation, which is just going to be part of your day-to-day existence. Because the reason why people are so excited about generative AI is that it's a great enabler, it's a general purpose utility, we're going to use it every day. And people are saying, well, is AI going to take my job? No, but someone who knows how to use AI effectively will. Okay? So these tools are just going to make you do everything a lot easier, but you've got to know what it can do, but what it can't do. So that's really for the next 10 minutes. I'm just going to highlight some of the magic, but also finish with some thoughts around the risks and things that you need to be aware of. Okay, so opportunity one. So we presented this a couple of weeks ago at the Sloan conference where we're in the final, but at a high level, as I mentioned, tracking data has been available for 25 years. It's had a problem of scaling because you need to be in venue. Okay, broadcast tracking was seen as a way of solving this, and I've been focusing on this problem with my team the last 5 or 6 years. Now, the problem there is, yes, it's great, we can identify the players, we can track them, but in football, there's 22 players in the ball most of the time. We don't see 22 players in the ball there, okay? We only see a partial view of that. So we don't have complete data. And really, if you look at what happens, what broadcast tracking is when you have the main camera view, you just want to track those players. And players are out of view, you can estimate that. But the big problem is when you have close-ups, okay? Close-ups or replays. So you have on the right-hand side, and this is an extreme example taken from a Bundesliga game, where we had a very active director and producer. They wanted to zoom in on certain players. So 20% of the time, we had that view, which means that we couldn't actually track anything. A broadcast tracking system can't handle that. Okay, so how do we actually solve that problem? As a data scientist, you don't want to have gaps in your data. For football, especially it's low scoring, you want to capture every pass, okay? Because that pass that you miss could be the key moment. And when you have those cuts in play from the broadcaster, that tends to be one of the most interesting parts to analyse. So what we're actually able to do, and I'll step through this a couple of times. So on the left-hand side there, we have the broadcast view. In the middle, we show what we get from our event data and our broadcast tracking. So we see here, it's a 9-second segment where we have 3 passes occurring. On the right-hand side, we're actually generating that. I think it's magical, right? So just from the broadcast tracking and event data, I'll play that again. We're actually able to reconstruct the full play. Again, just using the broadcast tracking and the event data, because our operations team is amazing. The human perception system is amazing. Humans, when watching it, they're able to do that transformation, saying, well, I know where those 3 passes are. That's a necessary context that we can put into a generative AI model to do that full reconstruction. This is powerful in terms of analysis because we can do a full reconstruction, we can have complete data, and we can do complete analysis. The method that we used, and we're going to release a paper this week to give the specifics and give the full evaluation. We compare against many different methods, but where we landed on is motivated with what's happening in autonomous vehicles where we use diffusion. And diffusion is widely used in text-to-image or text-to-video because it picks up these fine-grained details. And so in a similar way, tracking data is a low-dimensional representation of what we see in the pixels, but those trajectories are fine-grained, so we need to be able to reconstruct that. And so we've been working on this the last couple of years. Lead researcher Harry Hughes, along with Michael Horton and Felix, have done a great job with this work, and really think this is magical and transformative, and we're excited to share with everyone this, this work as we progress. So I'll just kind of show we've done numerous evaluations. On the top left, we see what the ground truth tracking is via our SportView system, and on the right, we see the raw broadcast tracking and the event data, and on the bottom right there, we see the full diffusion. So last night, we released a visualizer with a full game on GitHub. So if you're interested, we can share that with you. For clubs, talk to us. We've got a great sales team here. Talk to us. We'll set up demos. We can give you more games to step you through that. So we're really excited with the advancements here. Now, as I mentioned, now that we can generate that data, through this magic, we can actually do that analysis on every pass. And what that actually means, and if you've been to this conference, there's a lot of talk about these different measures that we have, especially around passes. So expected receiver, expected pass completion, and expected threat. Essentially, they're giving us our different thermometers on measuring how good a pass is across those dimensions. And so what that means is that we can tell a full story. So if you have 20% of the passes missing during a game, you're really not going to have the confidence to tell that full story, such as who had the most threatening passes, given that it's such a sparse variable there. But now with confidence, we can do those measurements. Or which player was more conducive of just having those safe passes or executing those safe passes. Or highlighting which players were available. You want to do those measurements. So now with confidence, you can do that at the game level or roll that up at the season level. However, we're still fine-tuning. Meaning that we want to pick up the specific nuances of players, because what this method really excels at is being able to identify and impute accurately what players, when players are out of view for a long period of time. Now, when you have a specific variation in structure, such as Mo Salah playing as an inverted winger or Jack Grealish playing as a winger who stays on the sideline there, you want to be able to pick that up. So currently, we just need to fine-tune to do that. And especially around shots, we can use more of the event data to actually give a better reconstruction. So that's kind of highlighting the things that we need to do to keep fine-tuning this, and we're improving this model every day. But what's really exciting is that we can do that, generate that complete data to provide complete analysis for every game that's being played. But what's really exciting about this is that it's not just for imputation. This is a foundation model. It can enable us to do a lot more. So, imagine if we could do text to tracking. Okay, so imagine if you just want to, similar to Sora, you could put in a textual description of a play that you want to see, and then you can actually generate that. This is what this model can do. Or you can augment that. You could drop a play, or you could actually draw and put a textual description to actually generate that. There are so many things that you can do. Work that we've done previously around ghosting. Our model can do this. It can do this in a really effective way. But you can actually put a textual description around that. So what you're seeing here, if you haven't seen this, red is the attacking team, blue is the defensive team, yellow is the ball, and white is what we estimate where the average Premier League team could defend. But you could ask the question, well, how did Man City defend that? Or how would Tottenham defend that? And we can actually do that simulation. And so what you're actually seeing here is this concept of retrieval augmented generation. And actually what that means is you can actually use your own data set or own model and wrap that around like a text-based large language model like GPT-4 or Gemini. And essentially that solves the interface problem where you can ask a question in any language and it can map it to your specific language. And some recent work that we did with Tennis Australia, you may have seen this, for the last Australian Open. So essentially what we're doing is predicting where the next shot is going before the shot has actually been made. And so what's really interesting is when you see how predictable a player is, or you could ask the counterfactual, well, how would Djokovic play that point? And then you can do that simulation. More recently, I watched a movie, Gran Turismo, about the idea of using simulation to train people. I think, we talk about AR, we talk about Apple Vision Pro, having the ability to do these things is not that far away. Okay? At the heart of it is having the data and the models to do this accurately. Now, the other opportunity, as I briefly mentioned, was around retrieval augmented generation. And so there are limits on using ChatGPT or Gemini. Number one is the knowledge cutoff. So these models cost a lot to train. So if you hear the reports, I think GPT-4 cost $100 million. I think Gemini would be around the same. Took months to train, and then it's costly. And so as such, the knowledge cutoff is about April 2023, meaning that if you ask these models questions after that, you just won't know. And then also it hallucinates. So last year I talked at depth about hallucination, and I used this example in rugby union. How many tries did Cheslin Colby score in the 2019 Rugby World Cup? ChatGPT still gets this wrong. Okay. The reason why it gets it wrong is that the group matches isn't documented in any text anywhere. You have to go to Wikipedia, it's in a table somewhere, but that information is just not in the data set, so it just doesn't know it. So, however, think about this technology, don't let the facts get in the way of good story. So it'll just make things up. And the problem is, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not a rugby fan, if you don't follow South Africa, you won't know this, you won't catch this, and you can propagate this misinformation. Now, a potential way to get around this, as I mentioned, is using retrieval augmented generation, because currently the large language models out there are just basically based on general knowledge. Sport is its own language, it's a constructed language, it's basically the metrics and the raw data and the tracking data that we provide, but once we have that, we can wrap a text-based LLM around that just to interrogate the data. And I really think this will be the future. I think 12 months' time, most practitioners here would be using this if you're not using it now. So it's really simple. I gave a workshop last week. I teach a student how to do this in a minute. Essentially, in Python, you can just put a pandas file there, wrap a open API call around it. If you have a longer context window, it can work really effectively. Last year, we've done a lot of work internally on kicking the tires. So this was done by one of our great teams where we're actually doing text to SQL. Okay, so sports data is live dynamic. It changes every second of every day. But the SQL queries don't change. So it's similar to Bloomberg GPT, where they basically have proprietary language, their Bloomberg SQL language, and they can just map text to that SQL language. And we can do something similar here. Also, our great Chief Innovation Officer, Christian Marco, has done amazing work. He knocked this out in a couple of days, where we provide so many predictions. So would like to talk about our player prop prediction work, but maybe another time. But from every match, we can just generate all these predictions. It's very hard to query, so it's so difficult. So you can just wrap it around a text-based LLM, and you can make it interactive where you can interrogate that data. Now, that's really powerful because when we think about Apple Vision Pro and spatial computing, again, essentially we have infinite screens, infinite real estate to interact. We can ask questions in text, we can ask questions via speech. Those models and the data can help us basically answer and see what we want to see. And so this is a design, this is something that we're looking at. Our great designer, Andrew Squares, did this design up where you can basically see all the information, all our metrics, and you can interact with that. And this potentially is a way that sports consumption is going. However, there are risks. Now, I'm from Chicago. I live in Chicago. I'm from Australia, but I lived in Chicago the last 9 years. And there's a famous shot, you know, when Michael Jordan scored a buzzer beater over Craig Elo, the Cleveland Cavs. It's in all the Gatorade ads in the 80s and 90s. And I saw this video and I was shocked because it's not what I remember. Okay. So that's actually a deep fake. So Michael Jordan actually made that shot using generative AI technology. Someone doctored that to say, well, Michael Jordan missed that. Okay, and you have Craig Elo celebrating. Now, most people know this play. They know it's a fake. However, there are more subtleties around that. You can imagine if you are a prospective player sending in a video, you could doctor things up to make you look better. Or in the betting or media, just to incite some misinformation or get potentially a player in trouble, you could doctor these videos up. So how do we know what to believe? Because this stuff is getting pretty good. This is quite grainy, but the technology, if you can see with Sora and DALL-E and various other things, you know, it's a worry. So we have to be vigilant. We have to be aware of these things. Not sure if you're aware of this. Last year, a New York lawyer was short on time and basically asked ChatGPT for precedent. So it said, well, I need 10 cases, which is similar to my case. ChatGPT abided, gave 10 cases, but basically all the 10 cases that it came up with were wrong. They weren't wrong, they were all made up. And this lawyer got in a lot of trouble for that. Now, this kind of gets into some behavioural psychology. If anyone has read any Adam Grant's work, think again. The power of knowing what we don't know. Now, the problem with generative AI and ChatGPT and Gemini is that people think they have these superpowers now. They think they don't have to know a specific domain because they can just ask ChatGPT. Now, the problem is you don't know what you don't know. How do you flag these errors? You know, we're all in the room, we're experts in sport, we know our domain. We need to flag these things. But a lot of people out there don't know that. So they think that this technology can answer all the questions that they have. So this is something called the Dunning-Kruger curve, and it basically shows you when you don't know anything, you're overly confident. But the more that you know, the less that you know. Okay, so this really kind of speaks to mastery and skill acquisition. You need to know the domain. And when you're using this technology, you have to understand that it can be wrong. And you need to know your domain to actually flag these things. So as you progress in your day-to-day, just don't throw everything to this technology. You need to vet that, because ultimately that's going to be on you. Also, Sports Illustrated, interesting example last year, where they basically outsourced a lot of the content to generative AI and didn't let anyone know, and then they basically covered it up. The execs are gone now, the brand has been tarnished, and so you just need to be very careful, because if you get this wrong, you lose trust. And sport is about trust. It's about facts. You can't get that stuff wrong. You can't fake it. Okay? All of you, again, are sports experts. You can talk to someone who doesn't know sport, and immediately you pick that up. And that's really what we pride ourselves on at Stats Perform. So the insights that we generate, it's all heavily templated. It's heavily validated through our research and editorial teams. We make sure it's grounded to sports reasoning, meaning that we're just not sprouting random things. So if you look at the FA Cup match on the weekend when United beat Liverpool, our match preview gets vetted by research and editorial. We do generate automatic insights, and we've been doing that the last 10, 15 years. But those templates that were generated are grounded to sports reasoning, meaning that people have found these associations, they know what's interesting, and when something happens in sport, you can't really query it, it has to be automatically generated. And so for us, having the trust and reliability of the data is the most important thing. It's the most important thing, it's even more important now. And so that's really the final takeaway. I don't want to leave on a somber note, but really as leaders in your field, leaders in sport, decision makers, you just need to be aware of this, because ultimately this is assistive technology, and it should help you do your job better, but also there are risks associated with that. So I just have a couple of takeaways here. I'm sure I'm over time, but it's been a real privilege to speak to you again. I'll be around for the day, so I look forward to speaking to you. And enjoy the rest of the day. We have a great program. Thanks to Mike, Andy, Alex and team for setting this up. And we'll move on to the next panel, which is going to be very exciting. So thanks for your attention and enjoy the day. Thank you.